going to start with an anecdote. Like other diaspora Tibetans in Canada, my childhood was marked by annual demonstrations in front of an empty Chinese embassy on freezing Ottawa winter days. I'll never forget, though, one day, as I was watching my elders call out for a free Tibet, an English-speaking Canadian drove up to us, rolled down his window, and asked us, "Why do you group of Asians want a free Quebec?" And so I knew then that we had a long way to go in terms of education. Since then, I think we have come a long way, but have now landed in a very awkward position in which Tibet is simultaneously still a land of spiritual imaginary, perhaps a fading darling of Hollywood, and still clearly a political hotbed. But from the work of Machik, a nonprofit that I co-founded with my sister Tashi, and from my own lived experience here and there, I can assure you that there is a new and emergent Tibet, one that urgently seeks empowerment through knowledge and learning in the forms of the education system, human capacity building, through knowledge that builds sustainable communities and a bright green future. Machik is a nonprofit based here in the US, and we work to empower Tibetans on the plateau through knowledge and education. In a sense, Machik's very existence and mission upend conventions and confront assumptions about what can be achieved in what is clearly a challenging context. We are diaspora Tibetans working for and with Tibetans inside Tibet, the rural majority, farmers and nomads, and their children, who comprise over 70% of the population today. Gender and environmental issues are mainstreamed into all the work we do. We also work with the Tibetan literati, artists, musicians, Tibetans who work in the government. And this work is done constructively alongside Chinese institutions such as the education and cultural bureaus, forestry departments, universities, publishing houses, libraries, and so on. Not only is this possible, but in our own direct experience in the field, we think that it is a necessary step in the next phase of work for Tibet. This work is simply not about Tibet, but also about so many other regions and peoples who still have no access to clean water, electricity, basic health and education, let alone the internet and other technologies. The work in Tibet we're doing, I hope, is now a model of how to address much broader challenges, and it's especially incumbent upon us, I think, to understand and act upon them. So, as such, Machik is now at the beginning of a frontier of new explorations in knowledge and learning in a politically, geographically, and economically challenging context. We've embarked on an initiative that dares to believe that Tibet is a site for unconventional thoughts, their social expression, and ultimately for innovative solutions. But before we begin to tell you more about this approach, let me tell you about education in Tibet today. We began with the school, the Chungba Primary School, in a remote rural mountain community called Chungba. Through a system of contracts with the local county government, teachers, and parents, we established a boarding school that now houses over 270 children and 30 staff and teachers. The contracts state that just over 50% of the students must be girls. All the parents must participate in the PTA 4 times a year. The teachers receive a 30% salary bonus tied to their student performance, and so on. In aggregate, and along with other strategies, the plan has met with some preliminary success. In the first year of operation, these former goat-herding children placed first in their county exams. The officials were disbelieving and had them tested again. And this was especially surprising because we insisted these children take the city exams and not the country exams. And in a very stand and deliver moment, the Chungba students actually did better the second time. Actually, I think it's because it was the second time they'd ever written a test. But by building very real and close working relationships and trust with the education officials, the teachers, parents, and the children, we have begun to show that given the right resources, encouragement, and training, a very typical group of children and teachers from a very rural, typical community can in fact raise the standard of education for the rural majority. Currently, there are about 1 million Tibetans in our focus region, and in terms of Tibetan medium education, there are only 5 middle schools and 3 high schools for that entire region. Machik has now begun building the 6th middle school and the 4th high school for that entire population. We are working towards community sustainability and have constructed a greenhouse that now is able to grow vegetables all year, feed the children. We no longer purchase vegetables. We also have brought in clean water from a mountain spring source 6 kilometers away with a pipe dug 2 feet into the ground. And recently, about 2 months ago, we installed solar power at the school as well. It is now an established knowledge in development that one of the best investments you can ever make to empower an entire community is to invest in the girls and women. Machik requires that 50% of our students be girls, and we also support over 200 girls and women through high school and college, the real bottlenecks, in another region of Tibet. And finally, we've recently published the first anthology of Tibetan women's contemporary writing through the Beijing Minority Press. And as well, we publish and support the first ever Tibetan women's journal, which is shortly to go online. Now, in doing this work and thinking about what knowledge and education means to communities in which we work, it became quite clear to us that local people at the grassroots level have a very deep desire to know about the world, their place in it, to connect with others, and to do so with their own identities and voices intact. They all want to tell their stories, stories which have long pasts and aspire to have equally long futures. So while technology flattens the world for some, creating a more equal playing field for certain communities, many local communities around the world desire to be part of this globalized world, but on their own terms, and to act on a global stage with the full presence of their own distinctive ways of being. These stories that they aspire to preserve, to expand upon, stem from their own forms of knowledge that are bound up with the substance of their place, their languages, their histories. As they emerge in deeper forms of interrelationship and exchange on a global scale, they seek self-expression, an agency that enables them to maintain this distinctive form of being. And in this way, the problem and the potential solution of Tibet is merely a specific instance of a much broader problem of local communities and regional cultures distributed throughout the world. To address these issues, Machik has partnered with the Tibetan and Himalayan Digital Library at the University of Virginia, which was the library being founded by my colleague David Germano. And we have begun on an initiative to digitally model the Tibetan world through GIS, maps, images, audio, video, text, and immersive objects. And what I'm really excited about is the aggregate use of all these known technologies has incredible power to reshape how local people see themselves and the world in them. And what's even more exciting is once they're trained in how to use all of this technology, and then suddenly, we're able to get such a much deeper, more insightful view of what that world looks like. And to give you a taste of this other story, I'll show you a small selection of episodes and creative uses of this digital technology. Switch computers, please. So we're going to start in Camden and take a carbon-free trip to Tibet. Here we go. It's also much faster. And we're going to go first to Lhasa, the cultural center and heart of the Tibetan world. So through a project called the Lhasa Neighborhoods Project, we have documented the Lhasa neighborhood, what we've done is overlaid the traditional Lhasa neighborhoods over the current contemporary map. And much of that old neighborhood has disappeared and remains in the memories of people's stories. And if you go to the site, you can get a panoramic view of the Parkour, Parkour Plaza, I should say, which is the plaza in front of the holiest temple, the Chokang. Now, it's really exciting when I go to rural schools and show these images to children. Most of these kids, for example, in Chungba have never left the village, so they're incredibly excited. They've seen pictures of the Potala, perhaps, but never this kind of engagement with the Lhasa. Okay, switch computers, please. Thank you. So now we'll pull back and take a look at Tibet in the continental context. At an average elevation of 14,000 feet, the plateau rises out of the heart of Asia as the largest landlocked island in the world, and it covers about a quarter of China's landmass. Zeroing in again, you can see that through online mapping, we can show not only published census data, population, grain output, electricity usage, and so forth, but we can also overlay that data onto Chinese administrative boundaries with the Tibetan traditional self-perceptions of our own communities. So in a country where teaching geography itself is sometimes a tricky enterprise, this is a vital tool for teachers and students alike in Tibet. The THDL at UVA is the only foreign university with a contract with Tibet University in Lhasa, and this makes it incredibly useful to be able to not only develop this material, but to share it with people in Tibet and China. So I think now we'll go back to the Lhasa Neighborhoods project. And we arrived back in the city to have a look at the historic, religious, and political culture. We have worked with community residents to create a culturally meaningful map with its spaces that now live on only in the memories of the elders. And for each space, we are in the process of building up text, audio, video, images, and immersive objects. Okay, so this is in Lhasa, an example of the power of using this kind of technology to represent the oral culture of Tibet. These are women from a work unit who are singing a very traditional work song while they flatten the roof of a local building just under the shadow of the Potala. And in the few seconds before, we could see the text in Tibetan. It's also available in English and Chinese. So as much as possible, we are working towards a trilingual site for greater accessibility. It's a great language learning tool as well. It's another entire application of this, this material. And wanted to show you next an example of using this library, the digital library, as a way to show how Tibetan young people talk to each other. Many of you may know that Tibet has 3 major dialect groups, and it's incredibly useful to have a way for Tibetans from different areas to hear everyday spoken language in these different dialects. And this is a very good example of 2 young Lhasa girls having a conversation about a dream. And although the written text of Tibet is the same across the plateau, the spoken can vary quite a bit. Okay. And to give you a taste of another dialect, this is one of the most well-known contemporary Tibetan poets. He's from Qinghai, or the Amdo region, northeastern part of the Tibetan plateau. And his poem asks, where are we all going in this great ship?
저거도 체자스 기콩문득 고문득 나초 지와니 니능던 소르기숑 저거송디 예윤득 든접득 저거송 잔요밋 나치 통탑절 저거송데 종康마인 종康等장을 나왔죠 나초.
Okay. Now in addition to the language tools that this site represents, We also have many immersive technologies used. And for example, we find ourselves again in the center of the old Lhasa city at a monastery called the Merugomba. And it's a combination of a monastery as well as a lay residency. And using immersive technologies, we can explore this site in 2-dimensional and 3D forms. Here's an interactive set of blueprints from which we can see names of various spaces, view descriptions, images, and 360-degree panoramas. The same can be viewed in 3D form where we can walk through the spaces, jump to various rooms, and again, access different resources there. And right now, we're in the process of trying to layer into these immersive space the actual artworks and other contents using the technologies that allow you to descend passively into ever greater visual detail. So now we are going to continue with the mapping and look at one of the 3 main monasteries of Tibet, pardon me, the monastic universities, Sera. And what we've done is mapped out all the hermitages that are associated with the main monastery. So a lot of the former ascetics and yogis lived in these hermitages and practiced. Well, they're now fully mapped. So against the backdrop of satellite imagery, we can choose a hermitage and then a satellite image-driven interactive maps. Pardon me. And each of these are keyed in to descriptions and images specific to that location. I've shown this to former monks of Sera who live outside now, and they were incredibly surprised with the accuracy, very excited to have a chance to look at their former, I guess, alma mater. And now here's an example of something that a lot of Tibetans are very interested in, and it is a tour guide, a cultural tour guide by a local expert, the guardian or the keeper of the chapel inside Sera Monastery. And because this is expressed and available through the THDL, it's available to any Tibetan who has access to the web in Tibet. And next I wanted to show you, going very quickly through all the different kinds of text here. This is an example of the use of text. We have tens of thousands of old Tibetan text that has been digitized, scanned, and is available. What can be done now is you can look up a word, enter a word, look it up, see in which texts it appears in, which chapters in those texts, how many times it appears, and then actually look that particular word in that particular text up. And here are the scans of those texts. And right now, this is used widely by a number of Tibet scholars and increasingly by Tibetans in Tibet as well. This is very exciting use of the source. Okay, so here we are looking at back to the map of Tibet in the context of Asia. And in the hopes of reaching out further to the Tibetan community in Tibet, what we've done is we were working with brand new NGOs and Tibetans who are at the forefront of, I think, building a civil society, people involved in development work, who create these projects, finish them, write the reports, and then often there's nowhere to share them with others. And what we've done is create a whole site where Tibetans from inside Tibet are able to now to post their work and share it with each other and anyone else who wants to see what's going on and how the work is being carried out. Now finally, to bring all of this kind of technology back to the rural, back to places with no internet and barely any electricity, what we did this summer at the Chungpa Primary School was we had a group of filmmakers from the Maisels Institute who conducted a one-day film camp with kids. And 6 children were selected, and in the course of about 12 hours, they picked a topic, wrote a script, storyboarded the whole thing, filmed it, did all the sound, acted in it, and the instructor did the editing. But they ended up with a 9-minute clip, and which we'll show you clips of. I guessed that they would choose to do a video on the school, but I was very surprised when I saw the final product. They in fact did a film on alcoholism. So the story goes, these 2 young men, they're playing adults, are good friends, and they decide to have a day off of relaxation together. And what do? They buy 6 enormous bottles of beer. The local shopkeeper was very amused at being sort of cajoled into being an actress. So we're going to skip forward here. They're out in the local barley field, drinking and chatting about how good life is. Okay. Of course, cigarettes. Yes. And now this is the point where we see the conflict, and I think it's very, for me, it was a very sobering moment. It was very instructive to see that this is actually what the children chose to talk about, how to represent themselves when they had this opportunity to do so. So we don't have, unfortunately, time to watch the whole thing, but it will be posted online very soon. And what happens is the young man is given a lecture by his mother. It actually reaches him. He goes to find his friend passed out in the fields. They make amends. And so, you know, this was their first ever time touching a camera, and I was very, very excited about the work. Well, like children everywhere, they were just eager beavers to try this, and next year we'll be doing this multiple times out in the field. So I just want to wrap up really quickly. From having the privilege of listening to the speakers here at PopTech and meeting many of you here, I am deeply impressed by your creativity, intelligence, sometimes your audacity, but most importantly by your caring. In a profoundly interconnected world, the hope for the survival of Tibetan culture and identity is intricately tied not only to China, but to the world. In Tibet, we see an opportunity to create a model that may be replicated in other marginalized communities elsewhere in the world. We see the opportunity to create social transformation through locally relevant knowledge that is delivered through the education infrastructure and also mediated by technology. We have witnessed that such knowledge production and delivery facilitated by technology can reach the rural majority, reorder their sense of the world and their very place within it. We intend to help cultivate a new generation of educated, trilingually articulate, confident, and above all, caring Tibetans who will articulate their own community's needs, goals, and their way forward as full members of the global community. A knowledge-driven, tech-savvy, bright green future for Tibetan people on the plateau, in other words, an empowered Tibetan people, is an idea whose time has come. And so I hope also to show that this work is more than just about Tibet, that these issues and solutions apply to many other people and places around the world in similar contexts. I'm very happy to report that just in the last few weeks, the Royal Government of Bhutan has requested to work with us to develop a similar site for them as well. We can start to see that while technology can flatten the world for local communities in disparate areas, these same people have other aspirations to be fully engaged agents in a globalized world, but on their own terms as much as on the world's terms. So if you would like to witness a small but ancient tribe of people move successfully past marginalization and into an empowered, bright green future, then I invite you to participate in a remarkable story that we hope has a sustainable future. Thank you.